From Thai Theater Foundation, this is Spotlight. On this podcast, we talk to a Thai theater artist about their experience in America, the struggle, the joy, the whole journey, and fun stories along the way. I am Mo Rodvanich หรือเรียกง่ายๆว่าแตงโมนะคะวันนี้ตื่นเต้นมาก about our guest today. Once you hear him speak, you might feel like, this sounds so familiar. That's because he's the voice of Thai Chip and Dale from Disney's Mickey Mouse. He has also been featured on Conan and BuzzFeed, a native to the City of Angels, an actor, a podcast producer, and a journalist from Alice and KPCC. Quincy Surasmith.
Hello.
สวัสดีค่ะพี่ Quincy
สวัสดีครับ
ดีใจมากเลยตื่นเต้นมากได้ยินเกี่ยวกับพี่ Quincy มันนานมากแต่ว่ายังไม่เคยมีโอกาสได้คุยกันตัวต่อตัววันนี้เนี่ยได้เจอแล้วอยากจะไปอ่านประวัติมาพี่ Quincy ทำหลายอย่างมาก You're doing so many things I got no idea it's so awesome how does it all happen like how did it all started
Oh man ก็คือ just like too many things ผมเป็นคนแบบอยากทำนู่นอยากทำนี่อยากไปนู่นอยาก experience นี่
ชอบมากเพราะว่ามันแบบว่าเห็นความหลากหลายเห็นความสามารถในหลายๆด้านที่แบบว่าเอามาช่วยเหลือเกื้อกูลกันได้คืออันนี้เนี่ยพี่ควินซี่เริ่มจากอะไรก่อนคะ
ก็ถ้าเผื่อเกี่ยวกับแสดงเกี่ยวกับ theater เนี่ยเริ่มตอนอยู่มัธยมตอนอายุ14ผมเกิดแถว LA ไม่ได้ในเมืองnot that the US uses the ในเมือง system but แต่ก็ไม่ใช่ในเมืองแต่อยู่I don't know อำเภอ จังหวัด LA and ตอนเป็นเด็กแบบไม่ชอบอยู่บ้านอ่ะไม่ชอบแบบติดอยู่กับบ้านเพราะว่าพ่อแม่ก็ไม่อยู่บ่อยแต่อยากบังคับให้เราอยู่เลยแล้วก็แบบอยากหาสิ่งที่จะทำที่โรงเรียนแทน like I just want to find these extracurriculars so that I wouldn't have to be at home เพราะถ้าไปอยู่บ้านก็คือแบบเบื่อแล้วก็เหงาอย่างเงี้ยแล้วก็ตอนประมาณอายุ14เนี่ยก็คือเริ่มเจอว่าที่โรงเรียนเขามี theater program แล้วก็เราก็ไปโรงเรียนที่ก็แบบดีพอสมควรเป็นแบบ prep school public school prep school แต่ว่ามันไม่ใช่เป็น art school นะก็คือเลยก็ตอนอายุ14ก็คือ audition สำหรับ play สำหรับเขาเรียกว่า bottom locker เพราะมันมี locker ต่ำแล้วก็ locker สูง locker ต่ำก็ม1ถึง3 or grade 7 to 9 I knowมand grade 7 don't align exactly anymore but I think they used to so แล้วก็แบบไทยอเมริกันเราก็แบบใช้มั่วๆกันอย่างนั้นน่ะ แล้วก็ locker สูงก็เป็นม4ถึง6เนี่ยก็ grade 10 to 12เลยเขาจะมี theater สำหรับ bottom locker อย่างเดียวเลยแล้วก็ต่อจากนั้นเราก็แบบนี่ก็สนุกดีต่อจากนั้นก็แบบ audition สำหรับ musical ของโรงเรียนแล้วก็ต่อจากนั้นแล้วก็แบบติดใจ and so all through high school I just did that and then I grew to really love it
What happened next from the 14-year-old Quincy who is doing the theater and love theater into the Quincy today
I think something that's very important about my journey is that at no point was I ever all in nothing else And I think a lot of people think that the only way to be a career actor is to go all in. You have to go all in. But I don't think that's an option for everyone. And it does change what your outcomes are and what your possibilities are. So that meant when I was applying to college, because it wasn't an art school, I didn't understand what it was to audition into a theater program. So I applied for NYU and USC and UCLA. I applied for NYU Tisch, but they were like, attach your headshot and resume.And I was 17 and I didn't know what that meant. All my school ever taught me was that a resume for college was listing what clubs you did and what classes you did. But it's Tisch. They meant like an acting resume, right? And when they said headshot, I was like, I don't know what that is because we weren't a serious theater school. We were just a school. And you didn't have to hand one of those in to audition. You just signed up and you auditioned. And so I just remember cutting out one of my not graduation photos, but like my senior year photos where you just wear like a suit or whatever. And just like cut that and I like put it in and I sent that with like a normal like college application resume and sent that with NYU. And they were like, that's not a thing. So you can apply to like the normal program, but that's not a Tisch like application, you know?And same with like USC or whatever, right? So for all the places I did apply, I ended up just applying for like normal programs. I said I was just going to study literature or history or whatever. So I went to UC Santa Cruz and then I studied theater and I studied history. So what I did was I tried to do some theater art stuff in our department that ว่าแบบ หลังจากอยู่ไฮสคูลที่แบบ I went to a high school that has a lot of Asian Americans แบบ 90% มากขึ้นไปอ่ะเป็นคนเอเชียเลย
How's
เลยเรา
that
ก็แบบ
like? Was it a shocking what do you call a transition when you know come from school that have a lot of Asian Americans to like you know let's say when you go to college was it a big change?
It was a big change, but it took me time to realize it was a big change because and theater was a little bit part of that, right? Because in my college, I mean in my high school, what shows do we do? I got to do To Kill a Mockingbird. I got to do Midsummer Night's Dream. I got to do, we did Carousel and Bye Bye Birdie. And I got to direct twice. You know, like I did all these things and they're just like, you're the only students here. So of course, like if you want to do theater, just do it. Direct, act, whatever. And once you go to college, even though it's not like a BFA program, it's still competitive because you're now in there in a program with people who want to get it. And that's fine because I had a lot of friends in the theater department with me. But the department itself starts picking shows that they say they cast colorblind, but it's just like, who do they think of as those roles? And it's not people like me. And I didn't understand that until I started being part of that system and then doing theater. So there's a theater of color company at Santa Cruz called Rainbow Theater.
Yes, I heard
it's mirrored with like Berkeley's Theater Rice, which I actually don't think exists anymore. Or like LCC, La Pu de Coyote That Cares at UCLA. Except those are I think fully student run, and Rainbow Theater was student and staff run. There was this one man named Don Williams who basically we did shows every fall that were separate from the theater department, and there would be an African American Black show, a Latino or Chicano show, an Asian American show, and then a fourth show that was like it was called Poets Corner, but in hindsight you would call it something that's like devised theater, right? Where it's scenes and poetry and fully student written. But the other three would be plays from the canon of those communities. So, you know, Latino Chicano plays might do stuff by like Culture Clash. You know, one of my favorite plays we did was excerpts from Peeling the Banana, which was a New York troupe in the 90s. That was an Asian American troupe. Artistic director Gary San Angel, you know, and a bunch of like just people, right? Some people who end up becoming journalists or just writers or actors or something else now. In the 90s, they devised this theater, and then we redid that theater. And that was really fun. And I was like, I'm doing so much more interesting work with Rainbow Theater than I am through the theater department. And although the theater department, we also got to do like student written plays, and those are really fun too. But like, so I got a lot of experience, but when it came time to graduate, I didn't graduate with my theater degree. I just got my history degree and was like, okay, settle out. But it wasn't a BFA program anyway. I wasn't going to grad school. I wasn't trying to get into Yale Theater Onward or like, you know, some other prestigious program. So I was like, when you audition, I don't think they're going to care. Like they might care if you're very, very, very high tier, but I don't think they're going to care if they're like difference between BA Theater Santa Cruz or BA History Santa Cruz. They're just going to be like, read or don't read. I don't care what school you went to at that level. So I was like, okay, like, let's just do that. And continuing on that theme of like never fully in ตอนจบแล้วเนี่ยเราไม่ได้มีแบบบ้านที่จะแบบกลับมาง่ายๆแล้วก็แบบไม่ต้องทำงานแล้วก็แบบหา acting job ใช่ป่ะแล้วก็แบบ okay so for the first few years out of college I just worked at nonprofits like I just worked like I was like I need stability and I think a lot of people think that ถ้าเผื่ออยาก acting เนี่ยอยากเป็น actor เนี่ยเราก็แบบต้อง 100% ต้องแบบ dive เข้าไปแต่เราไม่มี liberty อันนั้นใช่ป่ะ
So how did you start?
Well, there's two things, right? One is that during college, I would do internships in the Los Angeles theater community. And one of them was at East West Players, which is, you know, the nation's premier Asian American theater company. Awesome. It's also the oldest still running theater of color in the US. And the year I interned was the year of the first National Asian American Theater Conference. It was called Next Big Bang. It was 2006. And I remember right before that was when I was starting to understand like, there's like theater of color because I started doing Rainbow, right? So I was like, there's theater of color and there's playwrights of color. And I started to find one of these ones, a name you might know is Prince Gomovilas, who was already writing stuff in the 90s, right? He already had published work in the 90s. And I was like, oh, who is this person? He's actually writing like he's a Thai American playwright. And I remember meeting him for the first time at that conference in 2006, and I was like speechless. I was like, "Oh my God, you're Prince Gomovilas. You're a Thai American playwright." And he's like, "Okay, like I don't know who you are, kid." And so at that point, you know, he had more stuff to come out still. Like he hadn't at this point, he hadn't adapted Mysterious Skin yet. He definitely Brothers Paranormal was like a decade away, you know, like. But he already had stuff of like. Theory of Everything and Hunk of Burning Love and Boys of All Nations. I think that's something he worked on. And I had never seen them play those plays, but I had read them from like online Asian American theater archives. Because I was trying to understand like, oh, there's theater that's about my experience. Like theater isn't just pretend to be someone else from like white literary culture. Theater could be about people like me. And if it's not already about people like me, it could be because someone just has to make it. And that changed my understanding of theater a lot in college. And I pulled that not just from Rainbow Theater, but from my like theater theory classes, right? Like this idea that like, you know, we study all these things. And I remember other students would be like, oh, theory is so boring. I just want to act. I just want to be a performer. And I was like, wait, this is the first time I feel like I understand why we're doing this. And it was all those like complicated theater artsy terms like semiotics and like the Turner magic mirror of like how theater reflects society, but can also reflect upon society. And I remember all my classmates just being like, this is so boring. I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, this is like, oh, I'm reading Theater of the Oppressed. And I'm starting to understand why people value like why theater is still relevant, right? Because that was like this idea within our classes that we're asking like, is theater still relevant? Like, and people would be like, well, it is because I want to do it, you know? And I'm like, sure. But, you know, if you look at the broad strokes, it's like people paying hundreds of dollars to go see Broadway style shows like live from far away is a very relatively unfamiliar experience to a lot of people now, especially if you're young, if you don't have money. Even if you have money or whatever, you might not be exposed to that stuff. But then I was like, oh, but that's if you think of theater only as paying $200 to go see commercially, like a big Broadway show. But what about what Teatro Campesino was doing in California, where they drive out in trucks to farm workers and do plays about those experiences for the farm workers? That's theater. Is that not relevant? Or when we see like Asian American shows that are about like themes and ideas that we care about, like it's not just about representation. Oh, I get to see a handsome version of me on stage, right? I'm like, that doesn't help. I don't have a Dala look like that guy. So it's not enough just to have someone who's like handsome and vaguely Asian, you know. But for me, you use that to unlock like, what is the story you tell with these people? What is the story that you can tell with people like us that are about things that we care about? And I was like, oh, so this is all good. This is all worth it. And so all this to say then, like, you know, in my years fresh out of college, I was like, okay, well, think about all those theater artists you met, right? Think about Prince Gomovilas. Or I saw, there's another theater company called Teada, Teada. And, you know, that's by Leilani Chan and Ova Sao Peng. And Ova Sao Peng is like Lao America theater artist, like
amazing man.
So good. And he like connects anyone who's like Lao or Lao adjacent.
Yes, or Thai as well. I was like having connections from him. I love him. Now that you talked about all the things that, you know, you've learned from like the realization you have about like theater and theater maker and the purpose of everything that, you know, you starting to understand, the dots started connecting. I was wondering, is this, you know, the time that you started feeling like you wanted to venture into journalism? And like, you know, because I've seen some of your article, read some of your article, and it's not just like, oh, fun reviews, but it has substance of what it's talking about. It's, you know, you produce and host a podcast called Asian Americana, which talks about, you know, Asian American culture and history. And I just wanted to know about all of that.
Yeah. So with both of these, I feel like, as I understood, like if theater is for telling our stories, right? For me, theater is telling our stories about possibility, about like, or exploring stuff that didn't strictly happen, but like happens in our minds, in our hearts, in our emotions. But Asian Americana is what I use, and podcasting journalism is how I tell stories of stuff that did happen. And one of the things that frustrates me sometimes is when people are like, I wish we saw more Asian American stories out there. I wish we saw more Asian stories out there. And when I ask them what they mean by that, they don't always know. But what they always point to is like, oh, more like Crazy Rich Asians, more like these Hollywood movies, right? And then if a Hollywood movie does well or not well or whatever, right, then they always like argue over that. And I go, but Hollywood's only one place where there's stories being told, right? What about all the people writing amazing books? Like I work with people who like write children's books and fiction and nonfiction books or graphic novels, and for me, my other medium is nonfiction and audio, right? Like there's all these stories of real people, real stories, like real stories, and there's, you know, histories, and it shows all this diversity and people's experiences and stuff. It's like I use the same brain as I use theater, except I can't make up any of the things that happen. I can't just go, okay, there's going to be this person's arc, so at this point they're gonna suddenly lose their mom or whatever, right? Like, but I just listen for what their story is, and I build that same arc the same way. And I think it's really important to think about that. Like, how can you support those stories more? How can you support audio journalism and documentaries and books? Those are our stories too. One of my favorite movies that came out in the past few years, the Asian American film, The Farewell by Lulu Wang, right? Where did The Farewell start? The Farewell started as a This American Life story that Lulu did for the radio. So and it's based on a real story, you know? So why does it only count if it's a high budget, pretty person? Because honestly, most of the people I know, Asian Americans or like คนไทยโดยเฉพาะ, right? Like we're not like rich, good looking people, you know? My family tree doesn't look like that, you know? But their story and experiences like that are still important, right? And so that's kind of where I got into. I got into it much later. I was just listening to podcasts all the time because I used to listen to public radio all the time. When I was with my brother. My brother's much older than me, so he would have the like NPR station on, and I would listen to that. By 2014, I want to say, that was the year Serial came out. And after Serial came out, which is a very popular podcast at the time, I was working with someone, and she asked me to help them make a podcast called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. And that was just about two Muslim women talking about life and politics and news and culture and stuff. And it was just a talk podcast. Like they would just talk about these things, but it taught me how to like edit audio and produce audio and stuff. And then so the next year I started working on my own podcast, Asian Americana. And then I launched that in 2016. And at this point I had been like going back to like trying to be like a working actor already for like a few years. How I actually ended up doing acting in was I like waited for a long time, and then I was like slowly, okay, like let me figure out when I'm ready for it. And then I had a friend who was like, don't wait till you're ready, just do it. And then she showed me all these reels from these actors who were terrible. They were so bad. And the problem was like, during this time in my 20s also, I was co-producing an Asian American art space in Los Angeles called Tuesday Night Project. And so I was seeing like really great new work, music, poetry, writing, theater, dance, visual art coming from the Asian American local scene, not the Hollywood scene, the local scene in LA. There's a huge one here, and drawing all these artists from across the country and stuff to come perform. And I was like, oh, these people are so good. Once I'm good enough, I'll be ready to start trying. And my friend was like, no, look at this really bad reel. Look at this actor who's really bad, and they booked this commercial and they're going to get residuals for that commercial. And she said, if this person can do it, you can do it. And I went, oh, okay. And so like for me, being inspired by very good people made me want to make good work. Getting inspired by bad people makes you go, I can do that. Screw that guy, you know, like. And so that's what I was doing. And then, yeah, like, so that's what I was doing all in my 20s, late 20s into early 30s. And those are the two things I've been kind of like juggling just to like tell stories, you know?
This is so awesome. I have no idea that oh my God, you've done so many things, so many interesting stories. And I just want to say that, you know, you inspired me in a way that I want to do good work. Because I was listening to you and I was just like, oh my God, like the life you touched. the things that you have experienced and it built up for you to like build on more work, because now you have more knowledge, more people, you venture into different stories and have more ideas. It's just so great. And so before we're going to say goodbye, because the time's about to be up, I wanted to know about two things. We've mentioned at the beginning that you were the voice of Chip and Dale. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you get to work with Disney? You sing in that? Did you write the song? Like, what is happening?
So that
Please tell us about the thing.
That one was fun because that was actually two separate castings. So if you watch the whole episode of it's called Our Floating Dreams in Disney's Mickey Mouse, you can watch on YouTube, or I think I might get more money if you watch on Disney Plus. So I don't know. The episode is just like, Mickey and Minnie are in Talat Nam in Thailand, and they're fighting for the best boat spot. There's only one spot left. And that's just the whole thing, right? Very like narak cartoon. And then Mickey sells pineapple, and then Minnie sells kapat. And then the spoiler alert is they're fighting, and then they crash, and then together they make kapat saparot. And so first I was hired just to coach the Mickey voice actor on how to say the Thai line, because so he would be like, okay, so how do you say, what's this line? Oh, like pineapple. So how do you say pineapple? I'd be like saparot, and he'd be like saparod, and I was like, no, saparot, and he'd be like saparod, and I was like, no, there's like a sapa, like there's like a glottal stop, and then there's like rot, and then you want to roll the R a bit, and then when he would do it as Mickey, he'd be like saparot, and I'd be like, Mickey, ทำไมเก่งกว่ายูวะแบบ ทำไม Mickey พูดเป็นแต่ยูพูดไม่ได้อะ
That's so awesome.
ไม่ใช่คนเดียวกันเหรอ and he was like, I don't know, Mickey's just better than I am. So at first I was there to hire that, and then their way to pay me for that, because I'm a union actor, is they're like, you can voice these side characters, but those are not the Chip and Dale. Those are just like the non-name characters. So they're sometimes off screen when they're like, oh, แบบเป็นคนตลาด. Like go be like อ๋อตรงนี้มาขายตรงนี้เขาขายถูกนะแถมอันอะไร like, so I just say like random stuff like that, and then like if they a character on screen, like at the beginning, I call her Pa Chang. There's a elephant selling ice cream, and then someone gives her money and she just whines and says ขอบคุณค่ะ, and then they're like, how would the elephant say it? I'd be like ขอบคุณค่ะ because they're a big elephant, right? Like that's, and then they kept that part, and they're like, okay. At first I was like, oh, นี่ก็สนุกแล้วแบบ no one will ever know I worked on this because I didn't do anything special for it. I just taught Mickey, the Mickey actor, how to say the lines, and then help them adjust lines, right? Because they're like, instead of saying I'm sorry, I was like, มัน serious เกินไปถ้าเผื่อเขาขอโทษกันแต่ถ้าเผื่อเขาพูดไม่เป็นไรกัน that's like how Thai people might be, like because they're not already like familiar, right? ไม่ใช่ขอโทษมันเรื่องมากก็ไม่เป็นไรก็แบบ okay, let it be bygone, and I was like, okay, แค่นี้ก็สนุกแล้ว collect check แล้วก็แบบ okay, check mark แบบเรา good job แล้วก็นั่น2018แล้วก็ใน2019เดือน March เนี่ยเรากำลังจะไปเที่ยวยุโรปเป็น5 อาทิตย์แล้วก็อาทิตย์ก่อนที่จะเดินทางเนี่ยเราได้referral แบบมีเพื่อนคนนึงถามว่าเฮ้ยนี่มันมี animation job อันหนึ่งอะที่เขายังไม่มีเขาไม่ได้บอกดีเทลแต่ว่าเขาต้องการคนที่พูดภาษาไทยเป็นแล้วก็ร้องเพลงเป็นแล้วก็เข้าใจดนตรี music แล้วก็ผมก็เป็นคนที่ I used to sing a cappella, I play guitar, I have musical theater, not like professional background, not like Broadway level, but like at all, right? I can do this kind of work, and I emailed them saying, I've actually done work like this recently, but it's for Disney, but it's for a project that's still in progress. So I don't know, I can't show it to you. And they're like, oh, นี่มัน project เดียวกัน except I'm the composer for that episode. So the week before I leave, I drive to his house, and then I explained to him like, okay, here's what like Thai instrumentation sounds like, because he didn't really understand Thai stuff. I mean, he knew a lot of different musical styles, but I was like, oh, this sounds kind of Chinese, like it sounds Asian, but it doesn't sound Thai. And let me just and I was just like, okay, if you're a professional composer, you'll learn this quick. So I'm not going to explain that theory to you, but here's like Lanat, and here's like Luk Tung, and here's like Mo Lam, and here's just different Thai musical aesthetics. And here's like old Thai movies, and here's like a trailer for Fa Thalai Jod, like just listen to what how Thai people compose. And he was like, okay. And so if you watch the whole thing, the rest of it has really good, it sounds like an old Thai movie. It sounds like a Thai movie from the 60s. But then there's a gag where Chip and Dale, while Mickey and Minnie are fighting for the boat spot, Chip and Dale just take it because they're distracted. And at first they just had stock music, just like, oh, they're going to sing something as they come in. And when I saw that the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, like they already have something for this. I don't need to worry about it. But he was like, no, we have to write that stock music. We have to write the music that replaces the stock music. And so he was like, I like this Ma'lam style that you sent me, that you had me listen to. I'm going to study the sounds and then I want you to come up with lyrics to sing. And I was like, จะเขียนอะไรอ่ะมันแบบ10 วินาทีอ่ะ right? And he was like, just do whatever. Just like, it doesn't have to be complicated because it's just a joke, right? It's just a joke. It's not like a Disney song. I'm not writing Frozen, you know? So he was like, just write something like, we're selling acorns in the river market. Come buy them. I was like, okay, ง่ายๆแบบเราไม่ต้อง serious มันใช่ป่ะ So I was like, okay, now I've never written Ma'lam before. I haven't written Lookthung before. Like I know the music, but I'm not like expert, right? So I was like, okay, จะแต่งเนื้อเพลงยังไง So I used my brain of like writing hip hop of like, okay, internal rhyme จะ rhythm ยังไงใช่ป่ะ แต่ว่ามันต้องเป็นประโยคไทย So I was like, okay, Chip กับ Dale, and then I was like, okay, what is internal rhyme?นี่สองพี่น้องขายของในคลองในกรองเรามีแต่ถั่วดีๆเพิ่งเด็ดสดๆมากินให้หมด and I was like this works, right? I was like, it took me a few tries, but I was like, I wasn't thinking like, oh นี่มันจะเป็นแบบ I was like, this will fit หมอลำ but I don't know how to write หมอลำ I'm writing hip hop เพราะว่าถ้าเผื่อ like Chip กับ Dale นี่ซองพี่น้องขายของในคลองในกรองแล้วมีถั่วดีๆเพิ่งเด็ดสดมากินทั้งหมด right? Like that would be the cadence if it was like an 80s era. And then he played me the music and he was like, and I was like, oh, okay. And then we went back and forth. I sang a couple times. He's like, oh, why do you sing this up or down? I was like, oh, because Thai is tonal. And if you sing, even though in the song there's notes, if your note goes high, but it's a low word, it'll sound like it's a high word. So you have to compose with the words in mind. But then I just instinctively did it. And it just became like, Chip กับ Dale นี่สองพี่น้องขายของในคลองในกลองเรามีแต่ถั่วดีๆเพิ่งเด็ดสดๆมากินให้หมด And I was just like that หมด sound, right? And I was like, okay หมดแค่นั้นใช่ป่ะ I was like, okay, good job เราเสร็จแล้วเป็น joke songมันจะไม่อะไรมากมายแต่ I got paid twice for the cartoon. I was like, okay นั่นก็แบบดีแล้วใครจะแบบถูก hire 2 ครั้งสำหรับการ์ตูนเดียวกันใช่ป่ะแล้วก็ไปยุโรปเที่ยวกับทำงานต่อแล้วก็ week of July 4th เนี่ยมันออก end of June นะบน YouTube แล้วก็แบบโอเคนี่ก็น่ารักดีน่ารักดีแล้วก็แชร์นิดหน่อยเรา search แบบต่างๆว่ามีใครสนใจอะไรป่ะแล้วก็ไม่ได้เห็นอะไรแล้วโอเคก็แบบก็คือ Disney cartoon แหละแบบ Disney create cartoon อย่างนี้ตลอดมันก็คงไม่ big deal ก็คือแล้วก็ตอนเราไปดูบน YouTube คนไทยก็เขียนว่าโอ้แบบน่ารักโอ้มิกกี้พูดไทยเก่งแล้วโอเคแล้วเราคิดว่าเป็น normal ใช่ป่ะจนกว่าอาทิตย์ต่อไปเราเซิร์ชภาษาไทยดีกว่าไหมว่าแทนเขียน Chip and Dale แบบ CHIP ลอง Chip กับ Dale ไหมแบบชอช้างสระอีอย่างเงี้ยโอ้โหแบบเจอเฮ้ยนี่มันแบบเพลงมันติดหูจริงๆนะแล้วก็แบบ
สุดยอด
แล้วก็แบบโอ้โหมันไวรัลจริงแล้วก็มีคนมี cover หมดแล้วก็แบบโอ้โหนี่อะไรวะ
โอ้ย
สนุกมากแต่แบบโอ้โหแบบตกใจเลยอะ
I feel like I'm so lucky to get to hear all these stories like behind the scene like you get cast twice like it's so great okay last thing this is for anyone who's listening whose heart is touched by your story or inspired by all the hard work you've been doing in all these fields do you have any more word of wisdom right here it could be from you from Mickey Mouse or anything as long as it's helpful to you in your journey
2 อย่าง I'll try to make it quick okay. 2 things the first thing is that along the lines of like don't wait till you're ready and stuff is that don't aim for exceptional I think sometimes we think it's something only counts if it's the first or the best or the only and I think that is not good for us because there's only room for one first. There's only room for one best. But why should there only be one thing, right? We shouldn't have to fight each other for that one spot. If you want to do something at all, just do it. And don't wait for it to be the best. And don't sell yourself as the best. I know that sounds weird. I think a lot of actors are taught like sell yourself for who you are. Sell yourself for what it is, because we sell our truths as actors and theater artists. Whether you're a writer or a designer or an actor or whatever, you're selling truth. You're not selling best. You're not selling exception, right? So when it comes to writing stories, whether they're fictional or non-fictional, right? Like if it's non-fiction, don't go like, oh, this is the first person to do this thing. He's the best person to do a thing. Why don't do a story about the third best person to do that thing? Why not do a story about just a person who does that thing? Right. And if it's nonfiction, why wait to like find, oh, this person, right? Like just write real people, write real stories. Don't make it exceptional. The specific experience will make it unique and worth listening to. It's already worth listening to. And then the other thing is, not everything has to be shared and blasted as if it were exceptional. When I started Asian Americana, I wasn't like, let me raise $100,000 and then share this with 1 million people. Mm-hmm. I was like, no, I'm just going to make it and put it out. And whoever's there to listen to it are the right people to listen to it. And at first that means 50 people, 100 people? That's fine. And even now, my show gets a few thousand people listening to it new. And then out of those people, like 50, 60 something people support the show. And people send me all the time like, oh, no one covers stories the way you do. And I think that means that don't try to go big immediately. And I think there's a lot of value in making mistakes in private and having small victories to build momentum off of. I think everyone's always taught like you have to go big and get big success. And especially as theater artists, but no matter what field you're in, if you go big before you're ready, that's going to feel like your only chance to do it. But if you just constantly make work, whether as a writer, as a designer, as a director, as a performer, whatever, right? Composer, no matter what it is you're doing, just make the thing. And if it's bad, put it away and make a new one. It's fine. And if it's good, share it. And if only X amount of people like it, those are the people who like it. That's fine. You can't อย่าไปพึ่งมันให้มันจะเป็นแบบฮิตจริงๆใช่ป่ะเพราะในอินดัสทรีเนี้ยมันไม่ใช่งานของเราที่ to create hits มันเป็นงานของเราที่จะ create.
Oh, Quincy, I feel so inspired. Thank you so much. Everybody, don't wait until you're ready. Just do it. Oh my God, I just feel so inspired. After this, I'm just gonna go off creating some stuff that I wanted to for a long time, and I think I wasn't good enough yet. You know what? I don't care. I'm gonna do it. Thank you so much, Quincy, for today, and I hope that all the listener at home listening to Quincy would be inspired, wanted to see more of your work or listening to your podcast. If anybody wanted to, get in touch with you, listen to your work, watch you, anything at all, how could they follow you, Quincy?
So find my podcast. You can find it at asianamericana.com. That's asianamericana.com. You can also find it on your favorite podcast app. We're also on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, all that stuff. And then for my own work, it's easiest to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Quinctessence. That's QUINCETESSENCE. You can find my work that way. I also have websites up, but เราไม่ได้เปลี่ยนบ่อย like about you can see a reel and stuff, but มันไม่สนุกเท่า Twitter ของเรา
Okay, so Quincy's Twitter and account, everybody don't forget. So thank you so much for today. This is Quincy. I'm just so happy. I just wanted to say thank you for, saying yes to be a guest for Spotlight, our podcast from Thai Theater Foundation, and to, dropping so many gems and just, keeping us going, being an inspiration of, a Thai theater artist in America, a person who wanted to understand about theater and just wanted to create the work and encourage other people to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.